So I am proposing, and I'm not the first one. I was actually like on the fence if this was good or not, but now I'm seeing so much support for it, and I feel like it might be time to rotate some cards.
Dun
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 dun dun.
dun! What's going on, everybody? It's Willoughby's, and welcome back to the Lore Chronicles. This just in: Sapphire cards are a big problem. And I know what you're thinking. Willow, didn't you guys already talk about this 3 weeks ago when the set first came out? Well, worry not. We're not talking about banning cards this time, but we are talking about rotating them. If you don't know what a rotation is or want clarifications about this, don't worry. We break it all down. Dick Burns explains everything in a way that is super easy to understand. So does Lorcana need rotations? Let us know. Enjoy the discussion. We made a video probably like 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago now, where we discussed some of the cards that we're kind of getting some whispers of maybe these should be banned, right? Cards like, BELLE, the new TAMATOA Happy as a Clam. We ultimately kind of wrapped that video up by saying if we had to ban a card, it would be Popsicle. That was your pick. But right now it seems like, we don't need anything banned. And
Yeah.
people were pissed.
Well, for one, it was so funny because a lot of people didn't watch the video because they just picked the cards that were in the thumbnail and were like, "You two are morons." And then other people were like, "Oh, this is a really level-headed discussion." So
As these things usually go. But yeah, so a lot of people were mad, and also, like, besides being mad, a lot of people were really divided on the issue. A lot of people expressed the sentiment, basically, it's way too early to be calling for bans. You just need to adapt. Well,
yeah.
here we are, no longer just 1 week into the set. We're almost a month, if not a month already, into this. I think we got like 1 more week left. So we're 3 weeks into this meta. Things have been shaking out, and Sapphire is still on top, man. All of these cards that we called out are still an issue, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, and if anything, bigger issues have like risen, right? I mean, you said it first. People got to give the credit where credit is due. I'm seeing JDZ getting credited with saying we need to ban Popsicle. I think I remember our Lore Chronicles' very own Dick Burns making that decision a long time ago. So what do you think about this kind of like resurgence of now everybody's flipped? At first, everybody was like, "Calm down, it's overhyped. These cards are overhyped." Now everybody's like, "No, we do need to ban some cards and errata some cards immediately." What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's so interesting how fast it turned. And I guess that's just the internet age. Like, I'm still used to buying Scry magazine to find the top 8 deck lists for like Pro Tours. So, like, it's so crazy seeing how quickly an opinion can change. And, still though, shout out to the people who wanted to wait and did wait, and then ultimately, in my opinion, came to the right decision that like something is a problem. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how things have kind of like swung back around, because I thought we had already had this discussion. I thought everybody knew how they felt about it, but clearly with the Sapphire dominance not going anywhere, and if anything, sure, it used to be in Sapphire Steel items, but I think we can both agree it's kind of shifted over to where now the real, big bad that we thought it was originally going to be is revealing itself to be as strong as it is, with Ruby Sapphire.
Yeah, remember when we were talking about some of our most notable cards and we were like, Sapphire Coil is the problem? I'm not going to pat myself on the back, or I might. But it's not like this is like some big profound thing and we're the only ones that thought of it. But it is funny how many people said we were stupid.
Yeah,
Which,
yeah.
It's true, I am stupid, just not necessarily on this subject.
Yeah, I think everybody could see that Ruby Sapphire was gonna be a problem with all the new things that it got, and then somehow we let ourselves, get a little distracted by the Oswald and the item shenanigans. But the point is, we're back, right? Ruby Sapphire's back in a big way. And you were saying, before we started recording, that the only thing that Ruby Sapphire loses to is Sapphire Steel, but it can beat everything else, and everything else it has been beating in all of these tournaments.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. And it's still like not that bad of a matchup against Sapphire Steel. I do think Sapphire Steel is favored because it draws more cards.
Right.
and it can just since the items in Sapphire Steel are so much better, to machine gun a Tamatoa is just way easier in Sapphire Steel.
Yeah. So the point is that Sapphire is all over the place. And so I'm gonna pull up some of these cards here that are really a big problem right now. At least, are making this perfect storm in Sapphire. And these are, once again, just like we called out before, we had all of these cards highlighted as the problem. So we wanted to propose a new suggestion, right? Maybe it's not as simple as, well, let's ban Popsicle and everything will fix it, right? Because a lot of players don't necessarily want their cards to be, errata or taken away and permanently altered, right? They kind of like the design. It's just a little overtuned right now. Well, you had a suggestion, which I'm sure we all see in the title of the video. Do you want to talk about what you think could remedy this Sapphire dominance we're seeing right now?
Well, first of all, I will give credit where credit is due. I and Dan on TFM talked about this. We got some visceral responses. This is on a live stream like a month ago, because it was proposed to us in our Metafy chat. And then I was watching the ICL last week, and afterwards there was like a podcast that Wonderland did, and he talked about this for like an hour. And I just happened to be working and didn't click off and listen to the whole thing. And I'm like, I immediately messaged you. I was like, oh, we should talk about this because like it has people really divided, and that's like a perfect topic for us. Is something where people will tell me I'm stupid and where people will argue in the comments. Yeah, so I am proposing, and I'm not the first one. I was actually like on the fence if this was good or not, but now I'm seeing so much support for it, and I feel like it might be time to rotate some cards.
Dun,
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 dun.
dun.
See, and people wonder why we're friends, but it's because we both just did that naturally. So, for people who aren't familiar with a rotation, I'm pointing at myself, it's me, I'm not familiar. What does that actually entail?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it does mean that Ravensburger will tell you in certain tournaments you can never play these cards again, and that is going to be core constructed. Hopefully, it would come with another format, and then we could even have DLCs that are like a legacy type format where the entire legacy of Disney Lorcana can be played. And then in something like that, you would expect all the decks to be quote unquote broken. So it's fine. If everything's broken, nothing's broken, right?
Sure.
But in core constructed, it would just be some of the more recent sets. Maybe in most games, it's like 2 years or 1.5 years worth of cards. I know this game is in its infancy, but I really do think with the very generous inking system and mulligan system, we might have to like ramp this up. Pun completely unintended, but great. We might have to ramp that up in this game because it is so simple. The game is closer to chess and poker than it is like a lot of other traditional trading card games.
Yeah, and I did hear something about that recently, is that like specifically what a lot of the pros that came here from other games like Magic like about Lorcana is its mana management system. So
yeah, low variance.
So that's interesting, right? Rotating sets. And like you said, this game is in its infancy. So I'm sure a lot of people are like, that's crazy. Like it's way too soon to have a rotation. But like you said, there's something different about this game that causes it to maybe need some quicker executions of rotation in this way. What I'm curious about though is like for the people that are saying, I'm going to lose something if we do rotations. I'm not going to be able to play my cards. So what is, the point of going out and buying the new set because they're going to, I know they're going to be removed in a few years anyways. What do you think about that? For people who feel like they're losing something if we switch to a rotation?
Right. So like there's technically like two kinds of rotation. And one of them is where they're very open about it and they say, yes, we're going to rotate these cards and they give you a timeline. The other type of rotation is where they just straight up ban cards, which is rotating out maybe your whole deck. Like if your whole deck revolved around Bucky and Prince John and they banned those two cards completely, you no longer have a deck, so they kind of just rotated your entire deck out. Or phantom rotations in the sense that they just make cards that are so much better than the cards you're already playing with. Why would you even play with them? So they also are going to lose value, and you're basically not going to be able to play with them anyway.
So it's kind of just one of those things where it's just part of the natural progression of, you know, it being a trading card game, and there constantly being new, you know, shiny things to play with. Your old things aren't always going to be as valuable, which we see all the time. I also think another perspective, at least in favor of rotations, or at least to kind of calm anybody who's like, what, why would I want all of my cards to be like useless after like a few years, is at the very least it is going to encourage more creative deck building, which is like the whole point, right? Is like,
Yeah.
like we're seeing here all of these like sapphire cards, and so it's like, well, if we like all of a sudden didn't have certain cards, you know, how do we solve that issue? And then it can kind of like make the game more fun in that sort of a way, very similar to like limited formats like sealed, where, you know, you're just working with the best 40 cards that you happen to draw in those 6 packs. And like that, I think, is like a really fun expression of skill for players, because they really get to like, and even in deck building for players. And it's something that we don't get to do often in the core constructed format, where it's like the same, you know, shell of 20 cards or even like more. And then you're just kind of teching different matchups here and there. So do you want to look at which sets you think should be banned and why? Or not banned, excuse me, rotated out.
Yeah, and this is literally straight from Wonder's stream. He suggested set 1 and 2 be rotated out. And, you know, I can totally see why, because we spent like 20 minutes, 30 minutes just looking at sets 1 and 2 on Dreamborn. And there were some cards that we were just like, how could they ever print a better version of this, right? Which means if they never print a better version of this, you just have to play these cards. If they do print a better version, you just have 8 of these cards. Like, that's another thing, is it restricts deck building so much if there's not some kind of constant ebb and flow in rotation, or like managing a massive ban list that you also have to keep track of.
Interesting. Before we show some of these cards, I'm curious, actually, based on what you just said, for some players that might be feeling like, well, in a cynical way of looking at what you just said, right? You said if they ban, for example, let's say, be prepared, right? If they ban, or excuse me, rotate out, be prepared, then that enables them to make, let's say, a better be prepared in the form of a new card, because then you don't have to worry about having, like you said, 8 copies of be prepared in a deck and making it too strong. However, some people, what do you say to people that are like, well, what's the point of making a better, like rotating out be prepared just to make be prepared again? Do you have anything that kind of like to say to that, if somebody were to say that?
Yeah, maybe they want the be prepared effect to be different and in a different ink. But then if that ink combination has 8 be prepareds, the games just drag on and on and on, you know, something like that. Like Wizards of the Coast, you know, they make Magic the Gathering. They have almost always had a Wrath of God effect, which is a 4-cost destroy all characters. But they have changed how the effect works, in rotated in and out, or they didn't rotate, they reprinted in and out different kinds of these effects in the form of core sets. Core set is something where they take some of the cards that they think are really important to the game, like the core of the game, and they constantly reprint them and remove them.
Interesting. Yeah, I think also where my head went with that is like, it's just gonna allow them to just play around with designing a little bit more, whereas like it's kind of like Disney's like What If, where they have this series where it's like, oh, what if, you know, Captain America was a this, right? We can kind of be like, well, what if, you know, Be Prepared was something else? Maybe it wasn't you know, singable, or maybe it was inkable at a higher cost, right? And that's some things that they kind of get some like designing liberties for. Or like you said perfectly, I think what was great about Lorcana is like, what if it was not a ruby card, right? We offer that kind of removal to a different, you know, ink color, but obviously we change up that card, make the limitation so that it's a little more fair and balanced. So, all right, cool. So now that we understand a little bit more about rotations and where there might be some merit to them, I think what's really going to convince people that this might actually be a good idea is looking at some of the sets that we have available to us. So let's start with set 1.
Yeah.
We've got powerhouse on powerhouse in set 1 to choose from, and a lot of these decks are just straight staples, right? Like
Yeah.
right out of the gate, Whole New World and Rapunzel. I get it, Whole New World sometimes has fallen a little out of favor, but like, when are you not putting Whole New World and Rapunzel in, like, let's say like a Steel Song, or even like, you know, a Sapphire Steel? Like, if you're playing Amber, you're playing Rapunzel, you know?
Yeah, almost always. I would say the cards that we picked are at least 90%, maybe 80%, you know. As soon as you pick the ink combination, it's in your deck.
Right.
And then you're restricted to like just the last couple of cards that you're actually going to put in your deck. Also, I should mention a benefit of like a rotation and us looking at these powerful cards is, you know, people say, well, what if they did ban Popsicle? Is Amber Steel just the most dominant thing ever? Because like Ruby Sapphire is kind of keeping Amber Steel songs at bay at this point, you know? So one way of getting rid of the trickle effect of, if we ban this, does this become S tier, would just be like, shake it all up.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because if you just rotate out certain cards, right, then just like you said, it's that rock paper scissors. So if you take away, you know, Ruby Sapphire's best toys, then yeah, sure, Amber Steel can run around uncontested, right? Because that deck is traditionally not great into it, and so doing it based on set is a good way to make sure that some of those things kind of like keep that rock paper scissors effect, and they're still keeps the meta interesting, right? Because when we see all Sapphire mirrors all day long, which is what a lot of our tournaments look like now, it's also just like less interesting as a player, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I believe at the Wisconsin 5K, they had to go all the way to like records 3 and 2 just to get some non-Sapphire mirrors on screen because people were sick of seeing it. It was day 2, they saw it all day 1, so it was really difficult.
Yeah, that's just like crazy to even think about. So we're looking at these set 1 cards, things like Be Prepared, things like Maui. That right there is like you said, like an 8 like staple Ruby cards in most good Ruby decks, if I may. I think
like, how do you print a better Maui?
You can't.
Yeah, like, and how do you make Maui irrelevant? Do you make challenging irrelevant? And at that point, what game are we playing? You know?
It's crazy because Maui, like, yeah, they've printed other high statted rush characters that will never be as good as Maui, specifically in Ruby. Every single set we get like a big statted rush character that nobody plays because they just did it so well the first time, and I think the key there was making him inkable. So now what happens if you have to play, you know, a 7-drop uninkable, not like a Scar, but think about, or even like, you know, that Goofy that I think is evasive and is a 5/5 has rush. Like now you're slotting that in over Maui. Like, what are we doing? But you know what? Makes it interesting.
Or Hercules, like 7/3. Notice all 3 of these cards are uninkable.
Right.
Like, they learned their lesson very quickly.
So I think it's interesting. Like, obviously, we try to pick also, you know, cards from set 1 for to represent different, you know, the ink combinations. Just because Emerald, for example, isn't like represented here, it doesn't mean that there's not any good Emerald cards in set 1, but it's just to show that like something like this could really shake up deck building. And if we're talking about things being a snooze fest of like the same, like, you know, cards being played on everybody's deck, I like just taking away, just from showing these 5 cards, that would completely change the meta if we took away these cards, right?
Yeah, it would be nuts. I couldn't imagine if I woke up tomorrow and there was just an emergency ban on like these cards. It'd be crazy.
So let's look at even some cards from set 2, which I really think starts to like shake things up. First of all, I get it. You know, Amethyst isn't having its moment right now. It was having its moment last set. But think of how long people have been saying Fox specifically is a problem, right? Like Goat is one thing, Rabbit is one thing, but specifically like that 4-3 stat line on Fox, having Rush, being an inkable singer, realistically, like, because even if she's not challenging, she can sing some of those like 3-cost songs that you really need her to. Look specifically in the cards that are next to her, right? Amethyst Steel, she can sing a Storm Rage on or a Strength of a Raging Fire if she needs to, you know, if there's something that she can't attack because it's not exerted, right?
We're talking about repeating.
Oh yeah.
We're talking about docks over and over. And yeah, there's Snake, obviously. Like, we didn't put Snake on the list, but like the fact that there's so many cards that are invalidated by a 3-cost 4 rush inkable character that's just so easy to play 4 of, that essentially draws you a card. If your character was going to be banished, it drew you a card. Like, there's virtually no drawback to Fox, and it is something that has just oppressed so many decks.
I think if you can't get value out of a Fox, like for example, those games where you like top deck, you have nothing on board and you top deck a Fox with no cards in hand, that's like you were already losing that game anyways, right? Like you're a Ruby Amethyst player playing against Emerald discard, you were losing that game anyways. That's the only time you don't want to see a Fox. Every other time, that is a live card in your hand. You know what I mean? Even looking at, and we have Prince John here, right? Think about if we rotated out, you know, some cards, discard is a really strong, you know, just like in general, that archetype is really strong, and we've seen how strong it can be in Disney Lorcana because it got an errata. It was the first errata, I guess so far, only errata. You know, who knows with the way the community's saying.
It was the first functional errata before people get in here. The flavor text was changed. So, yeah. And like Prince John has been something that people have pointed to for so long. Just ward in general on characters that you would never want to quest with. Like, yeah, Prince Philip, 3/2 ward 2 character. It can be really frustrating when your opponent's at 18 and they just drop that and just like giggle. But like Prince John, it's basically an item, except it has protection from almost everything.
Right.
Like it's just such a nightmare to deal with. Not only that, and then you can win with it technically.
Yes. Yeah, because you get enough of them on the board at some point, and you just quest out, because then they do also quest for 2. And think about it, right? If we get rid of Prince John, we're still people are gonna have to still play Prince John, but in the form of like Prince John's mirror or something, right? And like imagine having to build a deck around Prince John's mirror. It's like right now it's not looking viable. But if we had no choice, right? If we rotated out, you know, some of these sets, we might start to see some more creative deck building. What is Amber Steel without Cinderella, Let the Storm Rage On, and Strength of a Raging Fire? What are Steel decks without Strength of a Raging Fire or Storm Rage On? You know what I mean?
One of the biggest problems with things like Belle and Diablo, and then obviously Cinderella, is just like when your opponent has it turn 1, your turn 1 play is completely invalidated because your opponent is probably going to banish your character and potentially draw a card. It makes non-games. Yeah. And that is very frustrating. Just like how discard makes non-games. People also have to remember that like the local play store is a huge part of the people who actually buy the product. Like a lot of competitive players are not going out and buying cases and cases and cases of product, but the average league player probably is buying a few booster packs every single week, and that is what's keeping the store wanting to support Disney Lorcana.
Now, on that point, again, just out of sheer curiosity and already hearing the commenters chiming in, what do you say about that then to somebody who hears that and is like, well, then why would they do rotations? Because the average player feels like, again, like they're like losing cards. Like somebody who doesn't know anything about TCGs and is just playing Disney for the love of it, doesn't look up anything online, and it's just like, what do you mean I can't go to my hobby store and like play my princess deck that I like because you took Cinderella out of it? Like how is this still good for them?
Right.
Or innocent?
So, one, it's probably not.
Okay.
Two, those are also not exactly the same players I was talking about.
Okay.
Like those people are probably not buying packs every week. They're probably like going to find like a free league because they never ever update their deck. And like, no offense to those players, if I'm a corporation, not all customers are created equally, and I'm trying to stay solvent, and I'm trying to, appease, Disney and shareholders and stuff like that, as well as trying to appease the most players possible. You're never going to please everyone. So I think you should always lean towards the majority of the player base, and then right after that, the people who are actually spending money on your game. There's plenty of people who play this game, professionally. People hate that word in our comments, who never ever buy new cards, or they buy one or two new cards a set, because as you could see from all the cards we've listed, you have been able to play some decks since month 4 of the game and basically not have to upgrade them whatsoever.
Yeah, I remember specifically like set 6 or even set 5 Ruby Amethyst. Ruby Amethyst, like you could just take set 2 Ruby Amethyst and still win things, right? Probably until this set where we got all the items and stuff. But from sets like, well, really 1 through 6, you could just play the same Ruby Amethyst deck. Probably from 2 through 6, you could just play the same 60. And yeah, you might not win everything depending on how, things shake out, but you could win. And you could win tournaments because that deck did not need to be updated. And that is because of this exact thing that we're talking about here. So with this rotation, are you talking specifically like, because I'm not familiar with rotations, so is it you ban set, or sorry, I'm using the wrong words, is it that you rotate out set 1 and 2 at the same time? Is that how this would work?
Yeah, I would assume, because these seem to be like the experimental sets, honestly. Like the cards are just so good.
Yeah.
And then I know everyone in the comments, what about Diablo? That's set 3.
Yep.
And like, again, Diablo will be an absolute nightmare, but like Sapphire Coil plus every Ruby card gets rid of Diablo, right?
Excuse me, the Lore Chronicles revealed a card, Helga Sinclair, who will cleanly answer that Diablo. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah, like a big problem is like Diablo has access to all of these songs that we're pointing out.
Exactly.
How terrible is it when like you actually play like a Sir Hiss or something, and then they're just like, you use 2 ink on that? Okay, I'll kill that. I'll draw a card.
No, it's so true. Even the cards we have on screen right now, a Diablo, but there's no Let the Storm Rage On or Strength of a Raging Fire to follow it up. Okay, sure. A Diablo that is then gonna sing Sudden Chill, but there's no Prince John on the field, so they're not getting anything off of doing that. Like, yeah, I mean, they're gonna thin your hand a little bit, but it's not gonna mean the same thing, right? It's not like card attrition, So
the cost of discarding a card to put it into play and it covering up its shift target could be a cost.
Right.
Like it would be very easy to answer it on turn, at least at the most 3. It would be very easy to answer. And not only that, like the answers for it don't get hit by Ursula. That's another thing. All of the Diablo decks play Ursula. So you're just like, oh, I have my own Let the Storm Rage On. I have my own Strength. Like, okay, well, you better have like 3 in your hand. Yeah, like it's brutal. And then you also have to have your 1-cost card survive. So if you're on the draw, even if they play a 1/2 Diablo and look at your hand, do you even risk playing Cinderella? If they just shift Storm your Cinderella, you're cooked. Game's over already.
So I think clearly there's some merit to why Ravensburger might want to consider a rotation, specifically just like as a jumping off point for sets 1 and 2, right? And we're outlining all of those things here. It's worth saying, we always try to represent all sides, that this is a delicate balance, right? Ravensburger has a lot of things to consider here because, sure, on a competitive level, people are probably gonna be mad. On a local level, like where they're not like the complete opposite of competitive, where they'll never update their deck. They're playing with a set one starter deck for the duration of this game. They're not gonna understand what do you mean I can't bring this card to a tournament. And then even just like on the in between, there's gonna be people like me. I'll admit it. Is my first trading card game. The idea of a rotation scares me. It's so much easier for me to just know that every card is live. But I also understand that like by being interested in getting better and being more committed to this game in the ways that I try to be, that's going to come with change. And all of this change is natural, and it's also important for the health of this game, right? And I think regardless of where you at or where you're at with rotations or bans, I think a lot of people can see that Sapphire is kind of a problem right now. And so this is just us throwing our hat into the ring of like, maybe this can kind of start making things feel a little better.
I've even got solutions, which I didn't run past you.
Let's do it.
And I have not heard these somewhere else, which I'm shocked by. I've never had an original idea in my life. So here's my solution. Okay, Ravensburger, they can monitor the what's going on in the metagame. They have internal playtesters at Ravensburger. Obviously, they don't just randomly write down numbers on cards. Be like, oh, this will do. No matter how much it seems like they might. But yeah, and obviously they can't get everything right. Day one, more hours were put into playtesting than they did probably in 2 years. Day one of every set. That's just how it is, right? It's the digital era. So this is my suggestion.
All right.
One, get rid of terrible enchanted cards in sets. I don't need to open the wall. I don't need to open Ariel's Grotto, okay? The enchanteds that are gonna be fire, your Diablos, your Clarabelles, stuff like that, keep them, right? Replace the other ones with cards that you want to reprint. It's gonna let the cards still be played in Core Constructed. Let's say they wanted Ariel to stay, okay? That's a card that didn't make our list because it's not that oppressive. Well, they instead of reprinting Ariel, where it's going to be $1 rare, make a just enchanted version of Ariel. Okay, use the same art even. You don't have to run that past whoever at Disney. And then there's going to be players like me who are still just going to play with the old ones, and the old ones will maintain their value because the new one's going to be $100 card. Yeah, so like obviously people will still pay $5-6 for a normal Ariel. If you're gonna reprint commons, I say put them in the structure deck. They are like, if you look at set 2 structure decks, half of them were set 1 cards that you didn't want a bunch of copies of, like the 4/2 Lilo that quests for 2, stuff like that. Use those slots for commons that you want to reprint. Maybe Friends on the other side, although oppressive really early on, not a lot of decks are even playing it right now, so maybe that one's fine to get through. Like, we do need some kind of card draw if Popsicle Hiram is going to be gone, plus the bounce package. So, again, just like write set, I don't know, 27 on the bottom of it and throw it in a structure deck. That's my suggestion to Ravensburger. You guys can hire me as a consultant whenever you want. I do not need payment. I'll do it for free.
Just do it for free. Hello, new TCG player representing the people in the comments. What's a structure deck?
Starter deck. Single player deck.
Thank you. Thank you.
And then maybe they can be even more themed. Because right now, like, a lot of them have an identity crisis. Look at the dwarf deck. It was half dwarves matter, half items matter. Like, you could actually make a deck that maybe someone could take to League and win a match with. Because so far, the only deck that has been okay enough at that would be the set 2 Amethyst Steel deck. That was like the closest to a playable deck, So yeah, it would keep the old cards. Like, you would still have a reason to keep your old cards. They could always be brought back in a structure deck. If it turns out like, oh, this, items aren't like insane right now, we could reprint 8-drop Tamatoa. Like, you will always still have a reason to hold on to your old cards. And people won't necessarily want to just liquidate their entire collection, which will like tank the prices. You know what else tanks the prices though? When a card becomes unplayable. Have you looked at the Queen's Castle lately? That was like a $10 card for a while. It's $1. Flynn Rider, I've sold them for like $7. They're $1. I could go for hours. Like, even when you don't rotate cards will inevitably skyrocket because they're seeing a lot of play. Look at Oswald. Or they will tank to absolutely nothing because it's just not good anymore naturally. I think that's something people really need to get in their brains.
Specifically, like the fluctuation of cards and how that's just always going to be a thing.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, not everything can be playable all the time. Which you were very vocal about when we saw, the reveal of Set 7, and we saw some people being like, what? All 204 of these cards aren't good?
I know, yeah. It was so funny when people are like, why do they keep printing unplayable cards? Yeah, I don't know, because we... Here's my deck. Like, the only person I know who would have a deck like that was Danny, and when he was playing Mufasa. All right, that's a throwback.
So I mean, I don't know. I think you have said it all with rotations. I am on the fence just because, like I said, it's new to me. But I encourage anything that I think is gonna potentially make the game better. And what I do know is, like, for me personally, as someone who can't, justify spending all of the money that it would take to acquire all of these wonderful Sapphire cards that are great right now, it does, sometimes I feel a little left out that I can't play, a Sapphire deck and win all these tournaments the same way that everybody else can. I've got to get creative. I'm trying Amber Emerald over here. Like, what am I doing? So I'm open to something like a rotation, because if it meant that play is fun and balanced and also just like keeping it fresh and interesting for the community, that could be a good thing. So I think, by nature, we're usually a little adverse to change. But I think some good could really come of this. And I think regardless of where you stand with rotations, we can all agree, it sounds like, at least from what I've been seeing in the community, that something's got to change with these Sapphire cards. Because with the addition of these Sapphire cards, things just haven't been as fun in in a similar way. I won't say exactly the same, but still in a similar way as the Bucky stuff, which we already talked about. That's Ravensburger's priority is that's why they nerfed Bucky in the first place, was because they wanted the game to be fun for all. And I think right now everybody can agree Sapphire's just got a little something funky going on that's kind of messing with the fun a bit. So
yeah, and at the end of the day, if you look at other trading card games, like especially Magic, which is like one of the most played trading card games of all time, their formats that don't have rotation are just as popular as their formats that do have rotation. And much like eating corn on the cob, it's not goodbye forever, it's goodbye for now.
And there you have it, folks. Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, that was beautiful. What a beautiful way to end.
Thank you. I'm a poet.
If you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like. Fight with us in the comments of the YouTube video, not on Facebook, please. And also, only 11% of you are subscribed. If everybody watching this video hit the subscribe button, we would be monetized. All right.
Yeah, we could make $2 a video if everyone. It divides evenly, at least.
All right. Thank you guys so much for all the support. We will catch you in the next one.